Title: The Forgotten Souls of Silverwoods. Chapter 1. The Last Letter. Opening: A mysterious letter. On a cold, misty night, Sam, a journalist known for his fascination with strange phenomena, finds a letter on his doorstep. It's odd. No sender, no address, just his name scrawled in shaky, nearly illegible handwriting. Sam hesitates but ultimately opens the letter. The note inside chills him to the core. Silverwoods. You'll find the truth there, Sam. They're waiting for you. It's signed with a familiar name. His best friend, Mark, who had vanished 2 years ago while investigating the very town of Silverwoods. Sam's heart races as memories of Mark flash before him, remembering the last time he'd seen him, full of life and excitement over this groundbreaking story. Mark's disappearance left him hollow, haunted, but now a thread of hope, or perhaps terror, has reignited Sam's obsession with the truth. Unease and obsession take hold. Sam sits in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the letter. Outside, rain batters against the windows, and the city sounds seem distant and muffled, as though the world is slipping away. The words, "They're waiting for you," play over and over in his mind, like a dreadful lullaby. What does it mean? Who are they? Unable to resist, he dives into his research on Silverwoods, finding old newspaper clippings, faded records, and disturbing accounts of people who entered the town but never returned, or worse, returned changed. Some spoke of seeing figures in the fog, shadows that watched but never approached. Others muttered about eternal suffering before withdrawing from society altogether, like hollow shells. As the hours creep toward dawn, Sam's apartment feels colder, darker, as if the shadows are closing in. He realizes his decision has already been made. Whether from fear or the hope of finding Mark, he has to go to Silverwoods. A haunting journey begins. The following day, Sam prepares for his trip. As he drives away from the city, civilization fades behind him. The roads narrow and trees loom overhead, blotting out the sunlight. Fog clings to the ground, thickening with every mile. The GPS cuts out first, then his phone signal. He checks his map, but the road seems to stretch on endlessly, the landmarks unrecognizable. Sam's unease grows as he drives, the silence only broken by the occasional crackle of static on the radio, echoing like distant voices. Just when he's about to turn back, he sees a figure standing by the road, a woman, her face shrouded by a hood. He slows down, rolling down his window. She doesn't speak, only lifts her head to reveal hollow, empty eyes that seem to see right through him. "Silverwoods is a trap," she whispers, her voice thin and hollow, as if pulled from another world. "No one leaves unchanged." Before Sam can respond, she vanishes into the fog. He's left alone on the road, heart pounding, but the pull of the letter is stronger than ever. The shadows seem to grow denser, and he presses on. The Hakim abshite the arrival in Silverwoods. By dusk, he reaches the town of Silverwoods. The fog is thick, clinging to the ground like a ghostly shroud. The buildings loom in eerie silence, their windows dark and lifeless, like empty eye sockets staring out into the void. Every door is shut tight, every window curtained, as though the town itself has gone into hiding. There's no sign of life, but Sam senses a presence, watching, waiting. He steps out of the car, and a biting chill wraps around him. The silence is oppressive, thickening with each step. Shadows seem to slither at the edge of his vision, disappearing when he turns to look. He begins to question his decision, yet something, perhaps Mark's memory, drives him forward. Fafrachumsib, the innkeeper's warning. At the center of town, Sam finds a small, dimly lit inn with a faded sign that reads, Silverwood Lodge. As he enters, a bell chimes, though it sounds muffled, almost drowned by the silence outside. The lobby is empty, save for an elderly innkeeper with a gaunt, weathered face. She looks up as he approaches, her gaze cold and knowing. "You came," she says, her voice barely a whisper, like the sigh of an old, dying wind. "Once you step into Silverwoods, there's no going back." Sam forces a polite smile, trying to mask his fear. "I'm just here to find someone." The innkeeper's expression darkens, and her eyes bore into him with an intensity that chills him. "Many come here for answers," she murmurs, "but leave only with questions, or not at all." She hands him a room key, her hand trembling slightly. "If you hear whispers in the night, don't answer." As Sam takes the key, her words echo in his mind. The hallway beyond seems to stretch endlessly, each room door closed, secrets sealed within. Tratamatium, a room full of shadows. Sam's room is sparse, with only a creaky bed and a small table. The wallpaper peels, and a single dim bulb flickers overhead. He sits on the bed, feeling an eerie stillness settle around him. The quiet is suffocating, like he's trapped within a cocoon of silence. He pulls out Mark's letter, reading it again, his hands shaking slightly. Suddenly a faint whisper breaks the silence, just outside his door. Sam freezes, holding his breath, straining to hear. The whispers grow louder, shifting between words he can't quite make out. He moves closer to the door, his heart racing, and hears a raspy voice murmur his name. "Sam, we've been waiting for you." He backs away, hands trembling, as the whispers stop abruptly. Silence falls again, but the air feels colder, as if something unseen has slipped into the room with him. He checks every corner, every shadow, but finds nothing. Yet he can't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes are lurking in the dark corners, waiting for him to let his guard down. The first night's haunting. As night falls, Sam lies in bed, unable to sleep. He's haunted by the ghostly whispers, by the strange encounter on the road, by the hollow warning from the innkeeper. Just as he's beginning to doze off, a loud creak jolts him awake. The door to his room slowly opens, revealing the pitch-black hallway beyond. In the doorway stands a figure, tall, with eyes that seem to gleam faintly in the dark. The figure doesn't move, doesn't breathe, simply stares. Sam's blood runs cold as he realizes this figure isn't human. Its skin is pale and stretched tight, and its mouth is twisted into a strange, grotesque smile. "You came," the figure whispers, its voice barely audible like a breath in the dead of night. "You'll never leave." With a surge of terror, Sam scrambles back, heart hammering as the figure steps into the room, one slow, deliberate step after another. Shadows curl around it like living tendrils, clinging to its pale skin. Sam's mind races, and he fumbles for the lamp, but when he switches it on, the figure is gone. Only silence remains, thick and suffocating, the air heavy with an unspoken threat. A final message from the shadows shaken. Sam sits on the edge of the bed, fighting to catch his breath. He feels trapped, as if the walls are closing in. Just when he thinks he's alone again, a faint scratching sound comes from the window. He cautiously approaches, heart pounding, and sees a single word scrawled in fog on the glass. "Leave." Sam stumbles back, chills prickling his skin. But the command is clear, and he knows that whatever force haunts Silverwoods wants him gone. Or perhaps it wants him to stay and suffer. Determined, he steels himself, knowing he can't leave until he discovers what happened to Mark. But deep inside, he feels the town tightening its grip on him, whispering promises of secrets better left buried and horrors that should never see the light of day. The next morning, as the first slivers of light break through the fog, Sam realizes he's no longer just a visitor. He is now a part of Silverwoods, bound to its twisted fate and shadowed by the ghosts that dwell within. End of Chapter 1. In this chapter, the suspense, haunting encounters, and ominous warnings set a chilling tone, immersing Sam and readers in the cursed world of Silverwoods. The chapter ends with Sam's growing realization that leaving might be impossible, foreshadowing the terrifying journey that awaits him. Chapter 2. A Town of Shadows. Opening. A town frozen in fear. Morning brings little comfort to Sam. The light is weak, filtered through thick, oppressive fog that seems to cling to every corner of Silverwoods. Outside his window, he can barely make out the shadowed outlines of buildings, their forms distorted and strange in the mist. As he steps out of his room and descends to the lobby, he's greeted by the innkeeper, who watches him with wary eyes. "Leaving already?" she asks, her voice carrying a note of both relief and disappointment. "No," Sam replies, trying to steady his voice. "I have things I need to find." The innkeeper says nothing but gives him a long, knowing look. She doesn't try to stop him. Perhaps she knows it's too late for that. Sam steps outside, into a world muted and distorted by the fog, feeling as if he's crossed a threshold into another realm. Thakafam Thwansam exploring the silent streets. The streets are desolate. Every building seems frozen in time, as if Silverwoods has been locked in an endless twilight. The shops are dark, windows dusty and grimy. Shadows shift in the corners of his vision, but whenever he turns, there's nothing there. Just the empty streets and the overwhelming silence. The silence is oppressive, thickening with each step. Sam feels as if he's walking in a graveyard, surrounded by invisible watchers who lurk behind every corner, hidden by shadows and mist. He notices strange symbols carved into the wood of buildings, intricate patterns that twist and loop like creeping vines. They're rough, almost desperate, as though carved in haste. One symbol catches his eye, a circle with lines radiating from it, like an eye that sees everything. A chill runs down his spine as he realizes these symbols are everywhere, marking nearly every building he passes. Encounter with the townsfolk. Finally, Sam spots a figure in the distance, a woman wrapped in a dark shawl, her face hidden in shadow. He approaches her, his footsteps loud in the heavy silence. As he draws closer, the woman stops and turns, revealing a pale, gaunt face with eyes that seem too large, too empty. "Excuse me," Sam says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know a man named Mark? He came here a couple of years ago." The woman's eyes widen, and for a moment, Sam thinks she might respond. But then she looks away, clutching her shawl tightly and whispers, "You shouldn't have come here. None of us should be here." She turns and disappears into the fog, her footsteps silent. Sam is left alone, the echo of her words lingering in the air. Strange symbols and shadows. Sam continues down the street, feeling the weight of the town pressing down on him. The fog seems thicker now, and the symbols on the buildings appear to pulse, like they're alive. A low hum fills the air, and he feels drawn to an old, decaying chapel at the edge of the square. The door creaks as he pushes it open, revealing a dim interior that smells of damp rot and old stone. Rows of pews stretch before him, covered in dust and cobwebs. At the front, a small altar is draped in a faded cloth, and a tall figure carved from wood stands behind it, a faceless shape with outstretched arms. He approaches the altar, noticing strange carvings etched into the walls, words in a language he doesn't recognize. As he studies them, he hears a whisper, faint and elusive, echoing through the empty chapel. It's the same phrase, repeated over and over in a ghostly chant. "The stranger will return. The stranger will return." Warning from the elderly man. Startled, Sam stumbles out of the chapel, only to find an elderly man standing in the square watching him with dark, hollow eyes. The man's face is drawn, his skin pale and stretched thin over his bones. He looks at Sam with a mixture of pity and fear. "You don't belong here," the old man mutters, his voice barely audible. "The stranger marked us all, bound us to this place. But you still have a choice." Sam feels a surge of hope. "Then I can leave?" The old man's expression turns grave. "No one leaves Silverwoods. Not truly. The stranger's shadow lingers. Once you've seen the truth, the town won't let you go. And the stranger, he's always watching, waiting for his moment." The man glances over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear out of the fog, and whispers urgently, "If you stay, you'll see things you cannot unsee. You'll be one of us." A growing sense of dread. The encounter shakes Sam. The fog seems to grow thicker, swallowing up the buildings and muting the faint sounds of the town. He walks aimlessly, feeling as if the streets themselves are shifting around him, leading him deeper into the heart of Silverwoods. Each street seems unfamiliar, bending and twisting in impossible ways. At one point, he stumbles upon a small playground, the swings creaking softly as if pushed by an unseen hand. The playground equipment is rusted, twisted into unnatural shapes. He feels as if he's stepped into a nightmare, a distorted version of reality where the normal rules no longer apply. He hears a faint giggle behind him, like a child's laughter, and turns to find nothing but empty air. His skin crawls and he stumbles back, feeling a dark presence lurking just beyond his sight. Psrta. The whispering shadows. The shadows seem to grow thicker, taking on shapes that dart and flicker in his peripheral vision. He hears whispers, soft and insistent, calling his name. He tries to ignore them, but they grow louder, more urgent, filling his mind with fragments of strange, incoherent phrases. The stranger's mark, can't escape, bound to this place. The whispers twist into a chant, their voices mingling into a cacophony that fills his mind. He clutches his head, trying to block them out, but the voices continue, relentless and mocking. Just as he thinks he's going mad, the voices fall silent, leaving him alone in the crushing silence. The abandoned house. Desperate to escape the fog, Sam finds himself drawn to an abandoned house at the edge of town. The windows are broken, the paint peeling, and the door hangs open as if waiting for him. He steps inside, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. The house is empty, but it feels alive, as though it's breathing around him. Dust hangs heavy in the air, and strange symbols are scratched into the walls, some smeared with a dark, rusty substance that he hopes isn't blood. He wanders through the rooms, feeling as if he's walking through a tomb. In the corner of one room, he finds an old photo, a picture of Mark, looking haunted and gaunt, standing with a group of people who all share the same hollow, empty expression. As he stares at the photo, he hears footsteps behind him. He turns, heart pounding, but there's no one there. Just the empty room, the shadows closing in, and the sense that he's being watched by something unseen. Wadi Pranikawending, a message in the dark. As night falls again, Sam returns to his room at the inn, shaken and haunted by what he's seen. He tries to convince himself it's just his imagination, but he can't shake the feeling of being hunted, of something lurking in the shadows, watching him. Just as he's drifting into an uneasy sleep, he feels a cold breath against his ear and hears a whisper, close and intimate. "Welcome to Silverwoods. You're one of us now." He jerks awake, but the room is empty. A chill settles over him as he realizes the voice wasn't a dream. On the wall across from his bed, words are scrawled in dark, smeared letters. There's no escape. In that moment, Sam understands the truth. Silverwoods has claimed him, and the shadows have only just begun to reveal their secrets. Wamtivurus, the end of chapter 2. In this chapter, Sam's descent into the haunted world of Silverwoods deepens as he encounters townsfolk who are trapped in perpetual fear, whispers of the stranger who cursed them, and chilling manifestations that grow more sinister with each step he takes. The chapter builds a relentless sense of dread, leading Sam and the reader further into the terrifying unknown that lies within the town's shadows. Forobanja Noi. Fatrin the Mashtruyen Chochonkai. Sorn 4800 Chu Viet Bangyong Jukindi. Rong Ron. Sohai. Mami. Bian Bangting and ChatGPT Janoi. ChatGPT. Here's a deeply expanded version of Chapter 2, a town of shadows with a goal of maintaining a chilling, ominous tone. This chapter brings Sam further into the dark heart of Silverwoods, as he becomes entangled with its strange and tormented inhabitants, uncovering disturbing secrets about the town. But Chapter 2, a town of shadows opening. The town awakens. The morning light barely filters through the fog, casting everything in a sickly grey glow. As Sam steps outside the inn, he senses a change, a subtle shift in the air, as if the town is somehow more alive, more aware of his presence. Every structure, every shadow feels like it's leaning in, observing his every movement. The streets remain empty, devoid of the usual signs of life, but Sam can sense something lurking just beneath the surface. He's haunted by the innkeeper's warnings, her words lingering in his mind like a curse. Despite the creeping dread, Sam's curiosity drives him forward, compelling him to explore. the streets that twist and turn. As Sam walks deeper into Silverwoods, the streets seem to shift around him, bending and twisting in ways that defy logic. Buildings that appeared straight now lean at odd angles, casting elongated shadows that stretch across the ground like grasping hands. Sam feels disoriented, as if the town itself is alive, reshaping itself to keep him wandering in circles. Every now and then, he catches glimpses of figures in the fog, people standing motionless in doorways, shadows passing by windows. But whenever he tries to approach them, they vanish, dissolving into the mist like ghosts. The silence is suffocating, pressing in on him with a weight that makes it hard to breathe. He begins to feel a presence following him, a sense of eyes watching from every corner, hidden behind curtains and cracked doors. The feeling intensifies as he walks, growing heavier with each step, as if the town itself is tightening its grip on him. They're an ominous encounter. Eventually, Sam turns a corner and finds himself face to face with an old man sitting on a crumbling bench. The man's face is drawn and hollow, his skin stretched thin over his skull. His eyes are distant, unseeing, yet fixed on Sam with unsettling intensity. "You came here looking for answers," the man says, his voice dry and raspy, like dead leaves rustling in the wind. "But you won't find them, not in a place like this." Sam hesitates, caught off guard by the man's words. "I'm looking for a friend. He disappeared here years ago." The man chuckles, a hollow, humorless sound. "Many have come to Silverwoods looking for someone, something, and none have found what they sought. This place, it takes everything you have and gives nothing in return." Before Sam can respond, the man looks away, his gaze distant and empty once more, as if he's forgotten Sam's presence entirely. Feeling a chill settle over him, Sam continues down the street, but the old man's words echo in his mind, filling him with a deep, gnawing dread. Are the symbols and their shadows. As Sam ventures further, he begins to notice strange symbols carved into the wood of buildings and etched into the stone walls. Each symbol is twisted and unsettling, a blend of spirals and jagged lines that seem to pulsate with a life of their own. Some resemble eyes, watching him from every angle, while others are intricate patterns that draw his gaze, as if trying to pull him in. One symbol in particular catches his attention, a circle with lines radiating outward, almost like a sun, but warped and distorted. As he stares at it, a wave of nausea washes over him, and he has to look away, feeling as though something is pressing into his mind, trying to burrow into his thoughts. The symbols feel ancient, filled with a dark energy that seems to seep into the air around them. He wonders who or what carved them and what purpose they serve in this forsaken town. Wamma Adimoas, the hollow woman. Further down the street, Sam encounters a woman standing in the shadow of a decaying building. She's wrapped in a faded shawl, her face pale and gaunt, with hollow, sunken eyes that seem devoid of life. She watches him with an unsettling intensity, her gaze cold and empty. Are you trapped here too?" Sam asks, his voice barely a whisper. The woman's lips twitch into a faint, twisted smile. "We are all trapped, bound to this place by the stranger's curse. Some have been here for decades, others for lifetimes. Time means nothing here." She steps closer, and Sam catches a glimpse of something dark and unnatural in her eyes, a shadow that writhes and shifts like a living thing. "Beware the stranger," she whispers, her voice low and filled with terror. "He marked us, bound us to his will. No one leaves Silverwoods, not truly." As she retreats into the fog, her voice fades, leaving Sam alone once more. But her words linger, echoing in his mind like a warning. Bahasavamshans, the chapel, and the chanting Sam continues walking, drawn to an old chapel at the edge of town. The building is crumbling, its stone walls covered in moss and ivy, but there's an eerie energy that seems to pulse from within. He steps inside, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The chapel is dark, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Rows of empty pews stretch before him, and at the front stands a wooden figure, tall and faceless, its arms outstretched in a grotesque imitation of welcome. As he approaches the altar, he notices more of the strange symbols carved into the walls, each one seeming to pulse with a dark, malevolent energy. Then he hears it, a faint chanting, like whispers carried on the wind. The voices are soft, almost inaudible, but they fill the air, echoing through the empty chapel. They speak in a language he doesn't recognize, their words filled with a haunting, otherworldly power. "The stranger will return," the voices chant, their tone filled with fear and reverence. "The stranger will return." A chill runs down Sam's spine as he realizes the voices are coming from all around him, yet there's no one else in the chapel. He stumbles back, feeling as though he's intruded on something ancient and sacred, something that should have been left undisturbed. A vision of the past. As he exits the chapel, Sam is hit by a sudden wave of dizziness. The world around him blurs, and for a brief moment he sees Silverwoods as it must have been in its prime, alive and bustling, filled with people laughing and talking, unaware of the fate that awaited them. But the vision quickly darkens. The people's faces twist into expressions of horror as a figure cloaked in shadow appears in the center of the square. The stranger. His presence radiates a darkness that seeps into every corner of the town, twisting it, corrupting it. The townsfolk scream, trying to flee, but the shadows swallow them, binding them to the stranger's will. Then the vision fades, leaving Sam standing alone in the fog once more, his heart pounding with fear. He realizes that Silverwoods has been trapped in this cursed state ever since, its inhabitants bound to the stranger's power. Fatum, a warning from the shadows. As night falls, Sam finds himself wandering the empty streets, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seem to thicken, taking on shapes that flicker and dart in the corners of his vision. He hears whispers again, soft and insistent, calling his name, filling his mind with a sense of dread. He turns a corner and comes face to face with a group of townsfolk, their faces pale and haunted. They watch him in silence, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and pity. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them whispers, a middle-aged woman with hollow eyes. "Silverwoods isn't meant for the living. It's a place of shadows, a place of eternal suffering." Sam tries to ask them about Mark, about the stranger, but they only shake their heads, retreating into the fog, leaving him alone with his questions. A visit to the abandoned house. Desperate for answers, Sam makes his way to an abandoned house on the edge of town, a building that seems to call to him, its windows dark and empty like soulless eyes. He steps inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. The house is empty, yet filled with a sense of unease, as though it remembers the people who once lived there. The walls are covered in strange symbols, scratched into the plaster with a desperate hand. In one corner, he finds a stack of photographs, yellowed with age. As he flips through them, he's horrified to see familiar faces. Mark, his friend, standing with a group of people who all share the same haunted expression. One photograph catches his eye, a picture of the stranger, his face hidden in shadow, standing among the townsfolk. His presence radiates an unnatural darkness, and Sam feels a chill settle over him as he realizes the stranger is watching him, even now. The final revelation. As Sam turns to leave, he notices a message scrawled in dark, smeared letters across the wall. "The stranger comes for all. The shadows bind us. Leave, if you still can." But Sam knows it's already too late. Silverwoods has claimed him, just as it claimed the others. The shadows have tightened their grip, binding him to the town's cursed fate. As he steps outside, the fog closes in, and he hears the faint sound of laughter, a low, mocking sound that echoes through the empty streets. He realizes that he may never leave Silverwoods, that he's become just another lost soul, trapped in the town's endless twilight. End of Chapter 2. This expanded version of Chapter 2 heightens the suspense and deepens Sam's descent into the eerie world of Silverwoods. It introduces the haunting presence of the stranger and the town's tormented history, setting the stage for Sam's further entanglement with the dark forces at play. Chapter 3. The Stranger's Warning Opening. Nightfall's descent. Darkness settles over Silverwoods like a heavy shroud, thickening the fog that swirls through the empty streets. The silence is deeper now, an almost tangible entity, pressing in on Sam with an oppressive weight. The memory of the strange warnings from the townsfolk haunts him, lingering like an unwelcome shadow as he wanders the darkened streets. He feels trapped, as though the town itself has closed around him, and with each step, he hears faint, ghostly whispers drifting from the darkened alleys. But something else is present tonight. He feels it, a powerful dark energy lurking in the fog, an entity that seems to watch him with cold, calculating eyes. The stranger. Sam senses that tonight, he might finally come face to face with the one responsible for the town's curse. A strange pull. Sam feels drawn to the center of town, pulled by an invisible force that seems to tug at his very soul. He walks in a trance, barely aware of his surroundings, his mind filled with flashes of unsettling images, faces twisted in pain, hands reaching from the shadows, eyes filled with terror. Each image feels like a memory, fragments of the town's dark history pressing themselves into his mind. He arrives at a dilapidated square, dominated by a cracked stone fountain. The water is stagnant, its surface rippling with a strange dark substance that seems more like ink than water. Strange symbols are etched into the stone, glowing faintly in the dark, and he feels a chill as he realizes the symbols are the same as those carved into the walls throughout the town. As he stares at the fountain, he hears a voice, deep, cold, and hollow, resonating from all directions at once. Sam. The sound of his own name fills him with a terror he can't explain. The voice is both familiar and utterly foreign, laced with a darkness that seeps into his bones. He spins around, but the square is empty, save for the shadows that seem to pulse and shift in the corners of his vision. At the ghostly procession, just as he's about to leave the square, a faint light catches his eye. A procession of figures emerges from the shadows, their forms barely more than flickering silhouettes. They move silently, their heads bowed, faces hidden beneath hoods and shadows. Sam's heart pounds as he realizes they're headed toward the chapel he visited earlier, their movements slow and deliberate, as if caught in an endless loop. Compelled to follow, Sam trails the procession, his footsteps silent against the cobblestone streets. The air grows colder with each step, and he can feel the weight of the fog pressing down on him, thickening until he can barely see the shapes ahead. As they reach the chapel, the figures stop, forming a circle around the door, their heads bowed in silent reverence. One figure turns, lifting its head just enough for Sam to catch a glimpse of its face, pale, hollow, with eyes that are nothing but dark voids. It's the same face he saw in the photograph back at the abandoned house, one of the faces alongside his friend Mark. He feels a rush of fear and dread, realizing that these aren't just shadows, they're the souls of those trapped in Silverwoods, caught in the endless pull of the stranger's curse. Inside the chapel, the door to the chapel swings open, and Sam is drawn inside, as though by invisible hands. The interior is darker than before, the shadows thicker, pooling around the altar like a living entity. The strange wooden figure looms overhead, its faceless head tilted down as if watching him. The symbols on the walls glow faintly, casting an eerie light that fills the space with a ghostly radiance. The figures follow him inside, arranging themselves in a circle around the altar, their heads bowed. They begin to chant, their voices a low, haunting whisper that fills the chapel, reverberating off the walls and filling Sam's mind with a dark, pulsing energy. The stranger will return. The curse must be fed. We are bound. The shadows watch. The chant is hypnotic, and Sam feels his mind slipping, his thoughts blurring. He tries to resist, but the words worm their way into his thoughts, twisting and distorting his perception. Just as he feels himself slipping into darkness, the chanting stops, leaving an oppressive silence. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerges. The first glimpse of the stranger. The stranger is tall and cloaked in shadow, his form shifting and pulsating as though made of smoke and darkness. His face is obscured, a black void where his features should be, yet Sam can feel the weight of his gaze, cold and calculating, pressing down on him. The stranger exudes a power unlike anything Sam has ever felt, a darkness that reaches into his soul and fills him with a sense of despair, so deep it's almost overwhelming. "Sam," the stranger says, his voice a low, sinister whisper. "You came seeking answers." Sam tries to speak, but his voice catches in his throat. The stranger steps closer, and Sam feels the air grow colder, the darkness around him thickening. "You wish to know of Silverwoods," the stranger continues, his voice echoing in Sam's mind. "You wish to understand the price of knowledge. But knowledge is never given freely. There is always a cost." Sam manages to find his voice, though it's barely more than a whisper. Who are you? Why are you doing this?" The stranger's laughter fills the chapel, a low, haunting sound that reverberates through the shadows. "I am the one who offered them eternity. I am the keeper of shadows, the watcher of souls. They wanted life beyond death, and I gave it to them, at a price." A terrible revelation. The stranger extends a hand, and Sam feels an invisible force pulling him forward, drawing him closer to the altar. The air grows colder, and he feels a dark energy seeping into his mind, filling him with images of pain and suffering. Visions of the townsfolk, their faces twisted in agony, trapped in endless loops of torment. "They bound themselves to me," the stranger whispers, his voice dripping with malice. "They wished to escape death, to live without end, but they did not understand the cost. Life without death is no blessing, Sam. It is a curse, a fate worse than the very thing they feared." As the visions fade, Sam stumbles back, overwhelmed by the horror of what he's seen. He realizes that the people of Silverwoods are not just trapped. They are prisoners of their own desire, bound to the stranger's will, forced to exist in a twisted state of half-life, forever denied the release of death. There's a warning and a choice. The stranger's gaze pierces him, filling him with a dread so profound it makes him tremble. "You are not bound to this place, Sam. Not yet. But you sought knowledge, and knowledge has a price. You can leave if you wish, but only if you make a choice." Sam's mind races, fear and confusion filling him as he tries to understand. What choice? The stranger smiles, a cruel, twisted grin that sends a chill through Sam's soul. "You may leave, but you must carry the shadows with you. You must spread my mark to those who seek answers, to those who dare to look beyond the veil. Only then will I release you." The weight of the choice presses down on him, suffocating him. He realizes that to leave Silverwoods, he would have to become like the stranger, a carrier of shadows, a bringer of darkness, forever marked by the curse. An attempt to resist. Desperate, Sam tries to break free of the stranger's gaze, to resist the pull of the darkness surrounding him. But the stranger's laughter fills his mind, cold and mocking, as though he can see every thought, every fear lurking within him. "You cannot escape, Sam," the stranger whispers. "Once you've seen the shadows, they are a part of you. You can no more leave them behind than you can leave behind your own shadow." Sam feels the darkness pressing in, filling his mind with whispers, voices that twist and writhe, urging him to surrender, to accept his fate. But he fights back, clinging to the memory of Mark, his friend who had disappeared into this cursed town. I won't be part of this," Sam says, his voice trembling. "I won't carry your curse." The stranger's smile fades, replaced by a look of cold, calculated anger. "Then you will remain in Silverwoods, bound to the shadows, trapped in the endless cycle of torment, just like the others." A final vision. The stranger steps back, and Sam feels a wave of darkness wash over him, filling his mind with one final haunting vision. He sees himself, wandering the empty streets of Silverwoods, his face hollow, his eyes filled with the same despair that he saw in the townsfolk. He sees himself joining the ghostly procession, forever bound to the stranger's will, a lost soul caught in an endless loop of suffering. The vision fades, leaving Sam trembling, his mind reeling from the horror of what he's seen. He knows now that there is no escape. Silverwoods has claimed him, just as it claimed the others, binding him to the shadows, to the stranger's curse. The shadows embrace. The stranger's voice echoes in the silence, low and sinister. "You have made your choice, Sam. Welcome to Silverwoods." As the darkness closes in, Sam feels the last traces of hope slip away, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. He is now a part of Silverwoods, bound to the shadows, forever marked by the stranger's curse. The last thing he hears is the stranger's laughter, echoing through the empty chapel, filling his mind with a darkness that will never fade. End of chapter 3. In this chapter, Sam's journey into the heart of Silverwoods reaches a new level of terror as he confronts the stranger, learning the truth of the town's curse and the impossible choice he must make. The chapter ends with Sam realizing he may never leave, his fate intertwined with the shadows that haunt Silverwoods. Chapter 4. The Trapped Ones. Opening. Bound to shadows. Sam's encounter with the stranger leaves him shaken to his core, haunted by the vision of his own face twisted in despair, forever wandering the streets of Silverwoods. Despite the crushing weight of hopelessness, he refuses to give up. He believes there must be a way to escape, to break free from the curse that binds the town and its inhabitants. But first, he needs to understand what happened to them, and to Mark. As he steps out of the chapel, the fog thickens, clinging to him like cold fingers, wrapping around his limbs and clouding his vision. The silence of the town feels even more oppressive now, as if the shadows themselves are pressing in, watching him with a dark, malevolent curiosity. A town of tormented souls, Sam decides to find the townsfolk he's glimpsed in passing. The silent, shadowy figures who seem to be caught in a trance, as if forever haunted by the memories of their former lives. He begins to explore Silverwoods once more, walking through the twisted, winding streets, each corner revealing glimpses of the broken souls trapped within the town's borders. The faces of the townsfolk are hollow, gaunt, with dark circles under their eyes, and a haunted emptiness that sends chills down his spine. They drift aimlessly, their expressions vacant, their movements slow and jerky, like marionettes under a dark spell. Some stand motionless in doorways, others sit in the middle of the street, staring into the void with glassy, unseeing eyes. They don't seem to notice Sam, or if they do, they make no attempt to speak to him. Yet every so often, he hears them whisper, faint words carried on the wind, fragments of a shared nightmare. Words like forever, suffering, and darkness fill the air, sending a shiver down his spine. He realizes these people are not simply inhabitants, they are prisoners, caught in the grip of a curse that has stripped them of their humanity. And a memory imprinted in time. As he moves through the town, Sam comes upon an old woman sitting on the front steps of a crumbling house. Her hair is white and wispy, her face etched with deep lines, her eyes sunken and rimmed with dark circles. She rocks back and forth, humming a melody that's both haunting and strangely familiar, her gaze fixed on something far beyond the physical world. Are you all right? Sam asks, his voice barely a whisper. The old woman looks at him with eyes that seem both empty and endlessly deep, as though they contain lifetimes of pain. She tilts her head, her gaze sharpening as she regards him. And for a moment, Sam feels as if she's seeing through him, into the depths of his soul. We're all trapped here, you know, she says, her voice barely more than a rasp. We're bound to this place, forced to relive our worst memories again and again, forever. Sam's heart pounds as he realizes the full horror of her words. These people aren't just cursed, they are trapped in an endless cycle of suffering, forced to relive their darkest moments, never able to escape. What happened here? He asks, his voice trembling. The old woman's gaze grows distant, her expression blank, as if she's slipping back into the nightmare that has consumed her. The stranger promised us eternity, she whispers, but he didn't tell us what eternity would be. We thought we'd be free, safe from death, but instead, we became his playthings, his shadows. At the House of Mirrors. Determined to uncover more, Sam makes his way to the heart of town, where a large, decrepit building looms, its windows shattered, its walls covered in strange, twisted symbols. It seems different from the other buildings, as if it holds a darker, more twisted energy. Above the doorway, a faded sign reads, "The House of Mirrors." Inside, the air is thick and stifling, carrying the scent of damp rot and something darker, more pungent. The floor is littered with broken glass and twisted metal, remnants of mirrors that once filled the rooms. As he moves deeper into the building, he feels a strange pull, as though something is calling him, drawing him further into the shadows. In one room, he finds a mirror still intact, its surface covered in a layer of dust. When he wipes it clean, his own reflection stares back at him, but something is wrong. His face is twisted, distorted, his eyes hollow and empty, filled with the same despair he saw in the townsfolk. Suddenly the mirror begins to ripple, and his reflection changes, morphing into a vision of himself, older, gaunt, his face etched with lines of suffering. He sees himself wandering the streets of Silverwoods, lost and alone, his eyes filled with an unending despair. The vision fades, and he stumbles back, heart racing, as he realizes the mirror has shown him a glimpse of his future. A future bound to Silverwoods, trapped in an endless cycle of torment. Baisiu, the inescapable loops. Shaken by the vision, Sam leaves the House of Mirrors, his mind reeling. He realizes that the curse of Silverwoods is more than just a loss of freedom. It's a binding of the soul, a trap that forces each person to relive their darkest memories in an endless loop. The townsfolk aren't just haunted, they are prisoners of their own suffering, bound to repeat their worst moments for all eternity. As he walks through the town, he sees the loops playing out before him. A man stands by a well, his hands bloodied, his face twisted in horror. A young woman sits on the steps of a house, her eyes vacant as she rocks back and forth, whispering to herself. Each of them is caught in their own private hell, forced to relive their pain over and over, with no hope of release. The horror of it all fills him with a deep, sickening dread. He realizes that if he doesn't find a way to escape, he too will be caught in a loop, forced to relive his darkest moments, his soul bound to the stranger's curse. At the ghostly gathering, night falls, and Sam finds himself drawn to the town square, where a group of townsfolk has gathered. Their faces are pale and hollow, their eyes empty, but they move with a strange, trance-like purpose, as if compelled by some unseen force. They stand in a circle, heads bowed, their voices low and monotone as they chant in unison. The words are foreign, filled with an ancient power that sends a chill through Sam's bones. The air around them grows colder, thick with a dark energy that seems to pulse from the very ground. The stranger binds us. The shadows consume us. We are his, forever. Their chant fills the air, rising and falling like the ebb and flow of a dark tide. Each word laced with despair. Sam watches, heart pounding, as he realizes this is no ordinary gathering. It's a ritual, a prayer to the stranger, a plea for release from the curse that holds them. But the ritual doesn't end in freedom. Instead, the townsfolk fall silent, their heads bowed, as though accepting their fate, resigned to their eternal suffering. A whisper from the past. As the townsfolk disperse, Sam feels a tap on his shoulder. He turns to see a young girl, her face pale and thin, her eyes filled with a sadness far beyond her years. She takes his hand, her grip cold and clammy, and leads him to a small, hidden alleyway where the shadows seem thicker, darker. "I remember you," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "You're like him, like the one who came before." Sam's heart skips a beat. "Mark. You knew Mark?" The girl nods, her gaze distant, as though remembering something painful. "He came here, searching, just like you. He thought he could help us, that he could break the curse. But the stranger, he showed him the truth." Her words send a chill down Sam's spine. "What happened to him?" The girl's expression grows haunted, her eyes filling with tears. "He tried to fight the darkness, but he couldn't escape. The stranger made him one of us, bound him to the shadows. Now he wanders, just like the rest of us, caught in the endless loop." Sam's heart sinks as he realizes the full horror of Mark's fate. His friend is not just lost, he is trapped, a prisoner of the curse, bound to the same twisted fate as the other townsfolk. At the final realization, the girl looks up at him, her expression filled with a mixture of sadness and fear. "If you stay, you'll end up like him." the stranger. He feeds on our suffering. He keeps us here, bound to our pain, forever. Sam feels a deep, overwhelming despair settle over him. He realizes that the stranger's curse is not just a punishment, it's a form of control, a way to keep the townsfolk bound to him, feeding on their suffering to sustain his own dark power. But as he looks into the girl's eyes, he feels a flicker of hope. There must be a way to break the curse, to free the townsfolk, and Mark, from the stranger's grasp. He can't leave Silverwoods, not yet. Not until he finds a way to end the suffering that has held the town captive for so long. The girl gives him a final sad smile, and then she slips back into the shadows, leaving him alone once more. But her words linger, filling him with a sense of purpose, a determination to find a way to break the curse. End of chapter 4. In this chapter, Sam uncovers the full horror of the stranger's curse, realizing that the townsfolk of Silverwoods are bound to an endless loop of suffering, forced to relive their darkest moments for eternity. The encounter with the young girl gives him a glimpse of Mark's fate, strengthening his resolve to find a way to break the curse and free the trapped souls of Silverwoods. The stage is set for a dark, twisted journey as Sam delves deeper into the secrets of the stranger's power, determined to find a way to end the nightmare once and for all. Chapter 5. The Forbidden Meeting. Opening. The haunting silence. After his encounter with the young girl, Sam's mind swirls with horror and determination. The truth about Mark's fate haunts him, but it also hardens his resolve. He can't abandon his friend to an eternity of torment. He feels the weight of the curse heavy on his own soul, pressing into his thoughts like icy fingers, reminding him of the limited time he has to escape the same fate. Sam wanders the dim, fog-laden streets of Silverwoods, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He senses the town's shifting shadows, lingering on him with an unnatural interest, as if even the town itself knows he is searching for a way out. Suddenly, a faint whisper drifts toward him from an alley, a hushed voice beckoning him closer. Tonight, the clearing by the twisted oak. We must gather for the ritual. Sam stops, his heart pounding as he realizes he has overheard something forbidden, a hidden assembly of the townsfolk. He waits, holding his breath as the shadows grow silent, and then decides to follow the whisper's instructions. The clearing near the twisted oak might hold the answers he's been searching for. The path through the woods. Night falls quickly, the thick fog wrapping around the town as Sam makes his way toward the outskirts. The forest surrounding Silverwoods is ancient and twisted, with trees that loom like skeletal figures, their branches reaching out like claws. The twisted oak, known only in whispers, is rumored to be the gathering place of the cursed souls who once sought to escape the stranger's grip. As Sam steps into the woods, the air grows colder, filled with an unsettling quiet. Shadows seem to writhe between the trees, their forms shifting and pulsating as though watching him from the dark. Each step feels heavier than the last, as though the forest itself is warning him to turn back. But Sam pushes forward, his determination stronger than his fear. After what feels like hours, he arrives at the clearing. The twisted oak stands before him, its gnarled branches reaching out in twisted contortions, almost as if it's alive. Beneath it, a group of townsfolk stands in a circle, their faces obscured by cloaks and shadows. They stand in silence, waiting, their heads bowed. The start of the ritual. The silence is broken by the low voice of an elderly man, his tone filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. Sam recognizes him as the same man he encountered days before in town, the one who warned him of the stranger's dark hold. "We gather tonight to remember the old ways," the man intones, his voice trembling. "We have lived in the stranger's shadow for too long, trapped in an endless loop of suffering. Tonight we invoke the forbidden rite, a ritual lost to time and buried in shadow. If we are to be free, we must break the chains that bind us." The townsfolk respond in unison, their voices a hollow murmur. They begin to chant, their words ancient and foreign, filled with a dark power that fills the clearing with a sense of dread. Sam can feel the air grow colder, the shadows deepening as the chant continues, swirling around the twisted oak like a dark mist. He realizes that this is no ordinary gathering. The ritual is powerful, dangerous, and as the townsfolk chant, he feels a pulse of dark energy radiating from the ground, seeping into his bones. The shadowy guide. As the chant reaches a fevered pitch, Sam feels a hand grip his shoulder. He turns to see the young girl from before, her face pale and serious. She gestures for him to follow her, leading him away from the main group and into the shadows of the forest. "They're trying to summon something," she whispers, her voice filled with fear. "They believe it will break the curse, but they don't understand what they're inviting in." Sam's pulse quickens. "What are they summoning?" The girl's eyes darken. "They believe it's a spirit of the forest, an ancient force that predates the stranger's arrival. But this ritual, it hasn't been performed in generations. No one knows what it truly summons." Sam glances back at the gathering, where the townsfolk's chanting grows louder, more desperate. He feels a chill crawl up his spine as he realizes they are playing with forces beyond their control, forces that might only strengthen the curse that holds them. A glimpse of the past. The girl leads him to a quiet spot in the clearing, where she places her hands on the ground, her eyes closing as she whispers a strange incantation. To Sam's shock, the air around them begins to shimmer, and the landscape shifts, warping into a vision of Silverwoods as it once was, vibrant, alive, filled with people whose faces are not yet etched with despair. In this vision, he sees the townsfolk as they were before the stranger's arrival, gathered in the same clearing, performing a ritual of gratitude to an unseen force. Their expressions are peaceful, filled with hope and reverence. But then, he sees a figure in the distance, a man cloaked in darkness, watching from the shadows. The stranger. The vision blurs and shifts, revealing the townsfolk's growing desperation as they seek protection from death. A gift that the stranger offers in exchange for their devotion. They accept, and the ritual turns dark, their faces twisting into expressions of fear as the stranger's shadow envelops them, binding them to his will. The vision fades, leaving Sam breathless. He understands now that the townsfolk's initial request for eternal life had a hidden price, a dark binding that enslaved them to the stranger's curse. The Elder's Warning. Back in the present, the chanting stops abruptly. Sam looks up to see the elderly man approaching, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and determination. "You've seen it, haven't you?" the man asks, his voice low. "The vision of our folly, the moment we condemned ourselves to this half-life. That ritual was supposed to protect us, but it chained us to a nightmare." He places a hand on Sam's shoulder, his grip firm. "We're trying to undo that ritual tonight, to break the chains that bind us. But the stranger's hold is strong, and we will need every ounce of power we can muster. Are you willing to help us? To risk everything?" Sam nods, though fear gnaws at him. He feels a deep connection to the suffering of the townsfolk, a desire to help free them from the darkness that holds them captive. The confrontation with darkness. The group resumes their chant, their voices rising in volume, filled with a raw, desperate energy. The shadows around them begin to pulse, swirling around the twisted oak like a dark vortex, growing darker and more menacing with each passing moment. Sam can feel the air grow thick with a malevolent energy, as though something ancient and powerful is being drawn to the ritual. Suddenly, a piercing cry echoes through the clearing, a shriek of pure terror that sends chills down Sam's spine. He turns to see a dark shape materializing at the edge of the clearing, a figure cloaked in shadow, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. The stranger. His presence fills the air with a cold, suffocating darkness, and the townsfolk fall silent, their voices trembling as they stare at the figure in fear. "You dare to defy me?" The stranger's voice echoes, a deep, hollow sound that reverberates through the clearing. "After all I have given you, you seek to break the pact. Fools, you are bound to me, and there is no escape." The elderly man steps forward, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "We have lived in your shadow for too long. We no longer fear you. Tonight, we reclaim our souls." The stranger laughs, a low, mocking sound that fills the clearing. "Then let the shadows judge you." At the clash of light and dark. As the stranger's laughter fades, the shadows around him surge forward, a dark wave of energy that sweeps toward the townsfolk. But the elderly man raises his hands, chanting a counterspell, his voice filled with defiance. The air around him shimmers with a faint light, a barrier of protection that holds the shadows at bay. The other townsfolk join in, their voices rising in unison as they call upon the old powers of the forest, invoking the spirit they believe will help them break free. The shadows recoil, twisting and writhing, as if in pain. But the stranger's power is vast, and the darkness grows thicker, pressing against the barrier, slowly forcing its way through. Sam feels a surge of fear as he realizes the ritual might not be enough, that the stranger's hold on them is stronger than they anticipated. In desperation, Sam steps forward, his voice joining the chant, pouring every ounce of his strength into the ritual. The air around him shimmers, and he feels a strange warmth fill him, a flicker of hope that they might just succeed. A frightful decision. The stranger falters, his form flickering as the combined power of the ritual pushes against him. But he does not retreat. Instead, he addresses Sam directly, his voice filled with a dark, taunting amusement. "You think you can defeat me, mortal?" the stranger sneers. "You are nothing but a flicker of light, a fragile soul. But I can grant you freedom if you abandon these fools. Accept my offer, and you will be spared." Sam feels the stranger's words seep into his mind, a tempting promise of escape. For a moment, doubt fills him, fear clouding his resolve. But then he looks at the townsfolk, their faces filled with determination, their voices steady in the face of darkness, and he knows he cannot abandon them. "No," he says, his voice firm. "I won't leave them to suffer. Not like this." The stranger's expression darkens, his form twisting with rage. "Then you will suffer with them, forever bound to my curse." The shadow's verdict. With a final surge of power, the stranger's shadowy form engulfs the clearing, smothering the flickering light of the ritual. The townsfolk scream as the darkness closes in, their voices echoing through the forest as they are swallowed by the shadows. Sam feels himself slipping, his vision darkening as the stranger's curse begins to take hold. But just as he's about to surrender to the darkness, he feels a hand grip his own. The young girl, her face calm, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "Don't give up," she whispers. "The shadows may consume us, but they can never take our light." With her words as his anchor, Sam clings to his last shred of hope, refusing to let the darkness claim him. End of chapter 5. In this chapter, Sam joins the townsfolk in a desperate attempt to break free from the stranger's curse, witnessing the full extent of the shadow's power. The chapter ends with a glimmer of hope, setting the stage for Sam's continued struggle to confront the stranger and seek a way to end the nightmare that binds Silverwoods. Chapter 6. The Stranger's Return. Opening. Awakening in the darkness. Sam regains consciousness alone in the clearing after the failed ritual, his head throbbing and his body feeling impossibly heavy. The once thick fog has dispersed, replaced by an unnatural stillness. The twisted oak looms over him, its shadow stretching like a dark omen across the clearing. Sam's memory of the ritual is a jumbled mess of flickering lights, chants, and the overwhelming presence of the stranger. The townsfolk who joined him in the ritual are gone, leaving only an echo of their desperate cries lingering in the air. As he staggers to his feet, he hears faint whispers filtering through the trees, fragments of familiar voices calling his name, filled with fear and despair. The whispers twist and mingle, growing louder and more insistent, as though pleading for him to understand something vital. Sam's hands tremble, a cold sweat prickling his skin. He feels a dark presence watching him, waiting for him to make a move. The hunt begins. Sam stumbles back through the forest towards Silverwoods, his senses heightened, every rustle and shadow feeling like the stranger stalking him through the trees. He reaches the town square, where the buildings loom like silent, empty shells. The sense of desolation is overwhelming, and the entire town seems transformed, darker, twisted, almost alive in its anticipation of something sinister. As he walks the empty streets, he sees the townsfolk reappearing one by one, but they are different now. Their faces are more hollow, their eyes more sunken, as if the failed ritual has drained them of whatever little hope they had. They shuffle through the streets in silence, their steps aimless and lifeless, and Sam realizes that their spirits are closer to the stranger's realm now than ever before. They look at him with expressions of haunted recognition, as though they know he tried to help and failed. In the distance, he sees the young girl who led him to the clearing during the ritual, her face pale and drawn. She gestures for him to follow her, and he does so, compelled by a strange sense of urgency. Of the girl's revelation. The girl leads Sam to a secluded alleyway where shadows twist and writhe like living entities. She looks up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "The stranger has returned stronger than before," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "He's angry. He doesn't want us to escape, and now he knows we tried to defy him. His power, it's bound to something far older and darker than we can imagine." Sam feels a chill run down his spine as her words sink in. "What does he want?" he asks, his voice tight with dread. The girl looks down, her hands trembling. "He doesn't want us to leave. He needs us. Our suffering sustains him. It's the pact he made with the shadows long ago. A deal to live beyond death, to be bound to the darkness forever. We're his prisoners, and we're his fuel." As the words sink in, Sam feels a new horror rising within him. The stranger's power isn't just about keeping them here. It's about feeding off their despair, their fear, their eternal suffering. And he realizes that as long as they remain bound to Silverwoods, the stranger's hold on them will only grow stronger. For an uneasy decision, Sam's mind races, his thoughts filled with a terrible clarity. The only way to break the stranger's hold on the townsfolk is to sever the pact that binds them to him. But how? And at what cost? The weight of the decision presses down on him, suffocating him as he realizes the stakes. The girl watches him closely, as if reading his thoughts. "There might be a way," she says, her voice trembling. "There's an old legend, a story about the pact. It's said that the stranger bound his own soul to Silverwoods, anchoring his spirit here through an ancient relic. If the relic is destroyed, the bond might break, but the darkness will demand something in return." Sam looks at her, feeling a flicker of hope. What kind of relic? Where would it be? The girl hesitates, her gaze drifting to the chapel. "The altar," she whispers. "It's the heart of his power, but no one who has tried to destroy it has survived. The shadows protect it." At the encounter at the chapel, armed with this new knowledge, Sam makes his way to the chapel, feeling as if he's stepping into the very heart of the stranger's domain. The air grows colder as he approaches, the shadows thickening around him, pressing in like a suffocating fog. The townsfolk watch him from afar, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and fear, as if they are both expecting and dreading what he's about to do. As he enters the chapel, he is met with an overwhelming sense of darkness, an aura so powerful it's almost palpable. The wooden figure he saw on his previous visit now stands as an imposing sentinel at the altar, its faceless form twisted into a grotesque mockery of life. He realizes now that the figure is a representation of the stranger, carved to watch over his realm. He approaches the altar, his heart pounding as he reaches out to touch it. The moment his hand makes contact, a shock of cold energy surges through him, and he hears a voice, a low, menacing whisper that chills him to the bone. "You dare to defy me?" The stranger's voice echoes, filling the chapel with a dark, malevolent power. Sam steadies himself, his voice steady but defiant. "I'm not afraid of you. I know what you are." The stranger's tale. The stranger's laughter fills the air, mocking and hollow. "Then you know nothing, mortal. You think you can break my power? I have existed beyond death, fed by the shadows, bound to this town by a force you cannot comprehend." As the stranger speaks, images flood Sam's mind. Visions of a man, once human, making a pact with ancient forces, exchanging his soul for a dark immortality. He sees the man standing at the altar, his form slowly transforming, consumed by shadows as he becomes something beyond human, a creature of darkness bound to Silverwoods for eternity. "Your suffering sustains me," the stranger hisses. "As long as you and the others are bound here, my power will never fade. I am Silverwoods, and Silverwoods is me." The weight of the stranger's words crashes over Sam, filling him with despair. But he steels himself, clinging to the faint hope that the girl's story might hold a kernel of truth, that the relic can break the pact, severing the stranger's power over the town. Bisum tenom, the desperate plan. Sam realizes he must destroy the altar, the anchor of the stranger's power. But he knows he cannot do it alone. The shadows are too strong, the darkness too vast. He decides to rally the townsfolk, to gather as many of them as he can, and lead them in one final act of defiance. He leaves the chapel, finding the townsfolk scattered across Silverwoods, their faces etched with despair. He calls out to them, his voice filled with urgency. "We have a chance to end this. We can break the curse if we stand together, if we confront the stranger as one." At first they look at him with hollow eyes, their expressions filled with hopelessness. But slowly, a spark ignites within them, a glimmer of the humanity that has been buried beneath the stranger's darkness. They gather around him, their voices rising in hesitant agreement, their fear giving way to a shared determination. The final confrontation with the townsfolk by his side, Sam returns to the chapel, their footsteps echoing through the darkened streets. They gather around the altar, forming a circle as they prepare to confront the darkness that has held them captive for so long. The stranger's laughter fills the chapel, echoing through the shadows as he materializes before them, his form shifting and twisting, a figure made of pure darkness. His eyes gleam with a malevolent light, and his voice is filled with contempt. "Do you think you can defy me?" he sneers. "You are nothing but shadows, bound to my will." But Sam steps forward, his voice steady. "We are more than shadows, and tonight we reclaim our souls." The townsfolk raise their voices in unison, their chants echoing through the chapel as they channel their remaining strength into one final desperate act. The air crackles with energy, and the shadows recoil, writhing as the stranger's power weakens. The more to see come the breaking of the relic. Sam steps toward the altar, his hand outstretched as he prepares to destroy it. The stranger's form shifts, his expression filled with rage as he lunges toward Sam, his darkness enveloping the room. But the townsfolk hold him back, their combined will forcing him to retreat, as Sam brings his hand down on the altar, shattering it into pieces. A shockwave of energy bursts from the altar, filling the chapel with blinding light. The darkness shatters, and the shadows dissipate, leaving only silence. The townsfolk collapse to the ground, their forms flickering as the curse that bound them begins to unravel. Chapter 7. Descent into Darkness. Opening. A false dawn. As dawn breaks, Sam stands in the remnants of the chapel, his heart racing with the relief of victory. He feels a deep sense of accomplishment, a belief that he has freed the townsfolk and broken the stranger's hold on Silverwoods. The lingering shadows dissipate, and for the first time since his arrival, the air feels lighter, the silence less oppressive. Stepping outside, he finds the streets empty, the twisted trees now standing still and silent. A strange calm fills the town. Sam feels almost weightless as he breathes in the cool morning air. The tension of the past few days seemingly washed away, but as he walks through the empty streets, a strange sensation pricks at him, a lingering sense of unease. It's as if the town is watching him, waiting for him to leave. The silence that once felt peaceful now seems expectant, like a trap lying in wait. The return to the inn. In search of rest, Sam returns to the inn where he first stayed. The innkeeper's absence feels strange, but he brushes it off, assuming she was released along with the other townsfolk. He collapses into bed, his exhaustion overwhelming. But as he drifts off to sleep, dark dreams begin to haunt him. Visions of faces twisted in pain, of shadows that linger even in the light. In the dream, he sees the stranger's face, twisted and inhuman, yet unmistakably aware. The stranger speaks to him, a mocking grin on his face. "Did you truly think it would be so easy? Darkness is not so easily defeated, Sam. I am a part of you now, just as I am a part of Silverwoods." Sam jolts awake, drenched in sweat. The room is shrouded in darkness, the faint morning light blocked by heavy, dark curtains that were not there before. The shadows cling to the walls, stretching and twisting in unnatural ways, as if mocking his earlier sense of victory. Sam realizes that something is very wrong. Tsetsa frowns, the illusion shatters. Determined to understand what's happening, Sam steps back into the street, only to find the town changed. The buildings are twisted, their walls slanting at unnatural angles, the fog swirling around him thicker than ever. The air is filled with an oppressive weight, and the light, though present, seems unable to penetrate the shadows that cling to everything in sight. As he walks through the distorted streets, he notices flickers of movement in the corner of his vision, dark shapes that vanish when he looks directly at them. The townsfolk are nowhere to be seen, their voices replaced by faint, mocking whispers that echo through the empty streets. It dawns on Sam that his victory was an illusion, a trick designed to give him a false sense of hope. The stranger had not been defeated. He had only retreated, allowing Sam to believe he'd won. Now, the curse has evolved, transformed into something darker, more insidious. An encounter with the false townsfolk. Sam rounds a corner and sees a figure standing in the fog. Relief floods him as he recognizes the young girl who had guided him through the town. But as he approaches, he realizes that something is off. Her eyes are blank, hollow, her face devoid of expression. She stares at him with an unsettling stillness, like a doll that has come to life. "You didn't free us," she says, her voice cold and empty, lacking the warmth it once held. "You only made him stronger." The words hit Sam like a blow, his hope crumbling. He tries to speak, to ask her what she means, but she turns and walks away, her form dissolving into the fog. He watches in horror as other figures emerge from the shadows, people he thought he had freed, their faces twisted into unnatural grins, their eyes filled with an emptiness that chills him to the bone. They surround him, their movements slow and mechanical, their voices rising in a chant that echoes through the fog. Forever bound, forever lost, darkness eternal. The chant fills his mind, drowning out his thoughts, overwhelming him with a sense of despair. He realizes that the townsfolk are no longer human. They are echoes of their former selves, twisted reflections that the stranger has left behind to mock him. And the descent into the underworld, desperate to escape, Sam runs through the twisted streets, his heart pounding as he searches for any sign of the way out. But the town has transformed into a nightmarish labyrinth, the streets looping back on themselves, leading him in endless circles. No matter which direction he turns, he finds himself back at the same spot, surrounded by the ghostly figures of the townsfolk. In his desperation, he stumbles into the chapel once more, hoping to find sanctuary. But the moment he steps inside, the floor beneath him gives way, and he falls, plummeting into darkness. His body feels weightless as he tumbles through the void, the shadows closing in around him, suffocating him. When he finally lands, he finds himself in a dark, cavernous space. The air is thick and stifling, filled with the stench of decay and rot. Shadows writhe along the walls, twisting and shifting like living entities, their forms indistinct, yet filled with a malevolent presence. The realm of the stranger. As he takes in his surroundings, Sam realizes he is no longer in Silverwoods. He has entered a place beyond the physical world, a dark realm where the stranger's power is absolute. The shadows pulse and breathe, filling the cavern with a sickening energy that presses down on him, making it hard to breathe. In the center of the cavern stands a massive stone altar, covered in dark, writhing symbols that seem to glow with an otherworldly light. The stranger stands beside it, his form more monstrous than before, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of darkness. His eyes gleam with a cold, predatory hunger as he looks at Sam. "Welcome to my domain," the stranger says, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Did you truly believe you could escape? Silverwoods is only a fragment of my power. Here, in the heart of the shadows, I am eternal." Of the offer. The stranger gestures to the altar, his expression filled with dark amusement. "You've been so desperate to save these pitiful souls, to break my curse. But tell me, Sam, What would you give to truly free them? Are you willing to pay the price? Sam stares at him, his heart pounding as he feels the weight of the stranger's words. He realizes that the stranger is offering him a choice, a chance to free the townsfolk once and for all. But he knows that any bargain made with the stranger will come with a terrible cost. The stranger's eyes gleam with anticipation, as if reading his thoughts. All it would take is a single sacrifice, he says, his voice a low, sinister whisper. Offer me your soul, and I will release them. Bind yourself to the darkness, and I will set them free. The enormity of the choice crashes over Sam, filling him with a sense of despair. He realizes that the stranger is playing with him, taunting him with the possibility of salvation, while knowing that the cost may be too great. The vision of freedom. In a final desperate attempt to sway him, the stranger places a hand on the altar, and the air shimmers with a vision. Sam sees the townsfolk, freed, alive, their faces filled with relief and joy as they leave Silverwoods, stepping into the light of the outside world. He sees Mark among them, his face filled with gratitude, his eyes finally free of the darkness that has haunted him. The vision fades, leaving Sam breathless, his heart aching with longing. The possibility of freedom feels so close, yet he knows that accepting the stranger's bargain means sacrificing himself, binding his soul to the darkness for all eternity. Ainsfram Doim, the descent into madness. The stranger watches him, his expression smug, knowing that Sam is trapped. But Sam realizes something in that moment. A glimmer of insight, a crack in the stranger's armor. The stranger feeds on despair, on the belief that there is no escape. If Sam can resist, if he can refuse the offer, perhaps he can find a way to weaken the stranger's hold. But the darkness presses in, overwhelming him, filling his mind with whispers and images of torment. He feels himself slipping, his will weakening as the shadows close in, wrapping around him like chains. The stranger's laughter fills his mind, a mocking echo that drives him to the edge of madness. A final act of defiance. Summoning every ounce of strength, Sam forces himself to his feet, his voice shaking but filled with defiance. I refuse your bargain, he says, his voice echoing through the cavern. I won't give you my soul. I won't let you win. The stranger's expression darkens, his form shifting and twisting with rage. The shadows around him writhe and pulse, filling the cavern with a suffocating darkness. Then you will suffer, Sam, he hisses. You will wander these shadows forever, bound to my will. But as the darkness closes in, Sam feels a spark of light within him, a memory of the townsfolk, of the young girl who guided him, of the hope that once filled Silverwoods. He clings to that light, refusing to let the darkness consume him. Bafi am the return to Silverwoods. With a final desperate surge, Sam feels himself pulled back, the shadows receding as he is thrust out of the stranger's realm and back into the twisted streets of Silverwoods. The town is empty, silent, but the darkness no longer feels as oppressive. He knows he has not defeated the stranger, but he has resisted him, weakened his hold over his mind. As he walks through the empty streets, he feels a sense of peace, a belief that he has found a way to defy the darkness, even if he is still bound to Silverwoods. The townsfolk may never be truly free, but they are no longer alone. And as he steps into the fading light of dawn, he knows that he has faced the darkness and survived, at least for now. End of chapter 7. In this chapter, Sam confronts the stranger in his true domain, facing a choice that would require him to sacrifice his soul. Though he refuses the stranger's bargain, he realizes that he is still bound to Silverwoods, caught between light and darkness in a realm where hope and despair are locked in an eternal struggle. This chapter sets the stage for a final, desperate bid for freedom, even as Sam's fate remains uncertain. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Past. Opening. Haunted by memories. Sam walks through the desolate streets of Silverwoods, feeling the weight of his recent confrontation with the stranger. Though he refused to sacrifice his soul, he can feel the darkness lingering in the air, pressing in on him. The town feels like a twisted maze, each street blending into the next as though attempting to trap him within its walls. The townsfolk are nowhere to be seen, yet Sam senses their presence in the shadows, like echoes clinging to the edges of his vision. He hears faint whispers, fragments of words that feel like memories reaching out to him, each one filled with a deep sadness and desperation. As he walks, he finds himself drawn toward the center of town, where the twisted oak stands in all its sinister glory. The tree feels alive, pulsing with a dark energy, its roots embedded in the very bones of Silverwoods. Sam realizes that the tree is not only a symbol of the stranger's power, but a vessel for the memories of the townsfolk, memories trapped in its ancient bark. The first memory, the pact. As he approaches the twisted oak, a wave of dizziness overtakes him, and the world around him fades. He finds himself standing in a vision of Silverwoods as it was before the curse, a vibrant town filled with laughter and life. He sees townsfolk going about their daily lives, oblivious to the dark fate that awaits them. Suddenly, a figure appears at the edge of the square. The stranger. Though he looks different, he is more human, his face unlined, his eyes lacking the malevolent gleam that Sam has come to know. The townsfolk gather around him, their expressions filled with curiosity and awe as he begins to speak. The stranger offers them a gift, protection from death, an escape from the natural order that would grant them eternal life. The townsfolk are hesitant, but one by one they agree, their fear of mortality clouding their judgment. As they accept the stranger's offer, a dark shadow spreads across the town, binding them to the pact. The vision fades, leaving Sam shaken. He understands now that the curse was born from the townsfolk's own desires, a twisted gift that turned their wish for immortality into an eternity of torment. The second memory, betrayal and despair. Sam finds himself pulled into another vision, this one darker and more painful. He sees the townsfolk again, but they are different now. Their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow, their bodies trapped in a state of half-life. They are unable to die, yet unable to truly live, caught in a purgatory that drains their spirits and fills them with despair. He watches as the townsfolk begin to turn on one another, their fear and frustration boiling over. They blame each other for their suffering, their once close-knit community unraveling as paranoia and distrust take root. The town's joy has turned to misery, its laughter replaced by screams and cries of agony. In the center of it all stands the stranger, watching with a cold detachment. He thrives on their suffering, feeding on their despair as his power grows. Sam realizes that the curse is not just a punishment. It is a trap, a web designed to ensnare the townsfolk in an endless cycle of misery, feeding the stranger's insatiable hunger. With the third memory, the seeds of rebellion. Just as Sam feels he can take no more, he is pulled into a third vision, one filled with a faint glimmer of hope. He sees a small group of townsfolk gathered in secret, their faces determined as they speak in hushed tones. They discuss a way to break the curse, a plan to confront the stranger and end his hold over them once and for all. The leader of the group is a man named Elias, a former leader of the town who has retained a spark of defiance despite the darkness surrounding him. Elias speaks of an ancient ritual, a forbidden rite that could sever the bond between the stranger and the town. But he warns the others that the ritual demands a great sacrifice, one that will require immense courage and unity. The townsfolk agree, their faces filled with resolve. They are willing to pay any price to free themselves from the stranger's grip, even if it means risking their lives. Sam feels a surge of hope as he realizes that the townsfolk once possessed the strength to fight back, to reclaim their souls from the darkness. But the vision fades, leaving him with a sense of loss. He wonders what went wrong, why their rebellion failed, and why the stranger's curse remains unbroken. Beast du Orc, the revelation, the final piece. As Sam stands by the twisted oak, the shadows around him deepen, coiling around his feet like tendrils. He senses a final memory waiting for him, a hidden truth buried beneath layers of darkness. He places his hand on the tree, and the last vision overtakes him. He sees Elias once more, standing alone in the chapel, his face etched with despair. The rebellion has failed, their attempts to break the curse thwarted by the stranger's overwhelming power. Elias is the last of the rebels, the others having fallen victim to the shadows. He knows that the ritual must be completed, but he is alone, and the sacrifice requires more than one soul. In a desperate act, Elias carves a symbol into the altar, a mark that binds his soul to the chapel in the hope that one day someone will continue the fight. He whispers a final prayer, a plea for redemption, before his form fades, his spirit absorbed into the stone. The vision fades, and Sam stumbles back, understanding the full horror of what he has witnessed. Elias's spirit remains bound to Silverwoods, waiting for a savior who can complete the ritual and free the town from the stranger's grasp. The call to action. Sam realizes that he has been chosen to fulfill Elias's legacy, to complete the ritual and break the curse once and for all. The weight of the responsibility fills him with both fear and determination. He knows that he cannot do it alone. He will need the help of the townsfolk, those who still retain a spark of humanity within their cursed forms. He calls out to the shadows, his voice echoing through the empty streets. I know you're here. I know you can hear me. I have seen your memories, felt your pain. I am here to help you break free, to finish what Elias began. For a moment, there is only silence. But then, one by one, the figures of the townsfolk emerge from the shadows, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and fear. They gather around him, their hollow eyes watching him with a newfound intensity, as if they too sense the possibility of freedom. The gathering of souls. With the townsfolk gathered, Sam leads them back to the chapel, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knows that the ritual will demand a sacrifice, but he is prepared to give whatever it takes to free them from the stranger's grasp. As they enter the chapel, the air grows cold, the shadows pressing in as if sensing the threat to their master. Sam approaches the altar, tracing his fingers over the symbol that Elias carved into the stone. He feels a surge of energy, a connection to the spirit of Elias, who guides him in the steps of the ritual. The townsfolk join hands, forming a circle around the altar. Their faces are filled with a quiet determination, their voices rising in a chant that echoes through the chapel, filling the space with a powerful energy. Sam feels the darkness tremble, the stranger's power wavering as the ritual takes hold. Final confrontation. As the ritual reaches its peak, the stranger appears, his form twisting and writhing with rage. His voice fills the chapel, a roar of fury that shakes the walls and sends a chill through Sam's bones. You dare to defy me? The stranger hisses, his eyes blazing with a malevolent light. You are bound to me, all of you. There is no escape. But Sam stands his ground, his voice steady. Your hold over them is broken. They have reclaimed their souls, and your power is fading. The stranger lunges toward him, his shadowy form stretching out like claws. But the townsfolk hold firm, their voices rising in a final chant that fills the chapel with a blinding light. The shadows recoil, writhing in agony as the stranger's form begins to disintegrate, his power unraveling under the force of the ritual. The ultimate sacrifice. As the stranger's power weakens, Sam feels a pull within himself, a call to complete the ritual with a final act of sacrifice. He realizes that the only way to fully sever the bond is to offer his own soul, to bind himself in place of the stranger and become the new guardian of Silverwoods. With a heavy heart, Sam steps forward, placing his hand on the altar. He feels a surge of energy, a wave of darkness pressing into him as he speaks the final words of the ritual, accepting his fate. The townsfolk watch in silence, their faces filled with gratitude and sorrow. One by one, they begin to fade, their souls freed from the curse, released into the light. The young girl reaches out to him, her face filled with tears, her voice a whisper of thanks. Thank you, Sam. Chapter 9. Breaking the Cycle. Opening. The weight of the ritual. Sam stands before the altar, feeling the weight of his impending sacrifice pressing down on him like a physical force. The townsfolk who had joined him in the chapel now watch in silence, their faces filled with both hope and sorrow. The chapel is filled with an oppressive stillness, as though it is holding its breath, waiting for him to complete the ritual that will finally sever the town's curse. As he looks into the hollow eyes of the townsfolk, he feels a powerful surge of resolve. He knows that he is their last hope, that his actions tonight will either free them or bind them to the stranger forever. The darkness within the chapel seems to coil, shifting restlessly, as if sensing the threat to its existence. The memory of Elias's sacrifice flashes through his mind, the vision of the old leader standing at this very altar, willing to give his life to break the curse. Sam realizes that he is part of a legacy of defiance, the final link in a chain that stretches back through generations of suffering. The ritual begins. Taking a deep breath, Sam places his hands on the altar, feeling the cold stone pulse beneath his touch. The symbol carved by Elias glows faintly, a flicker of hope within the darkness. He begins to chant, speaking the ancient words that Elias whispered in his vision. Words filled with a power that predates the stranger's curse. The air grows thick, the shadows coiling around him like living entities, their whispers filling his mind with doubt and fear. He can feel the stranger's presence pressing in on him, a cold, malevolent force that seeks to crush his will. But Sam pushes forward, his voice rising as he speaks the incantation, drawing on every ounce of strength he has left. As the chant intensifies, the townsfolk join him, their voices trembling but determined. Together, they form a circle around the altar, their hands joined as they channel their remaining energy into the ritual. The shadows writhe and pulse, their forms shifting as though in pain, as the stranger's power begins to unravel. We damn the manifestation of the curse. Suddenly, a shockwave of dark energy erupts from the altar, knocking Sam and the townsfolk back. The shadows in the room coalesce into a single monstrous form, the stranger, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of rage. His voice fills the chapel, echoing with a depth that seems to reverberate through the walls themselves. "You cannot escape me," he hisses, his voice dripping with malice. "Your souls are mine, bound to me by blood and shadow. This ritual is nothing but a futile dream." The stranger lunges towards Sam, his shadowy form stretching like claws, reaching for his heart. Sam feels a crushing force pressing down on him, a darkness so vast it threatens to consume him whole. But he holds his ground, refusing to let the stranger break his resolve. Summoning all his will, Sam speaks the words of the ritual once more, his voice a defiant roar that fills the chapel. The light within him pulses, pushing back the darkness, and for a moment, he sees the stranger recoil, his form flickering as though weakened by Sam's determination. A vision of past victims. As the struggle continues, Sam is pulled into a vision. An endless cycle of past victims trapped in Silverwoods, each one caught in the stranger's web, bound to relive their suffering in an eternal loop. He sees their faces, twisted in agony, their bodies broken and hollow, their souls drained of hope. He realizes that the stranger has claimed countless lives over the centuries, each one adding to his power. The vision fills him with despair, but it also fuels his resolve. He understands that he is not only fighting for the townsfolk of Silverwoods, but for all those who came before him, victims of the stranger's insatiable hunger. He feels their presence within him, a chorus of souls urging him to continue, to finally end the cycle of suffering. Returning to the present, Sam feels a surge of strength as he resumes the ritual, his voice rising as he speaks the final words of the incantation. The light within him grows stronger, pushing back the shadows as the stranger's form begins to waver, his once impenetrable power faltering. The final bargain. The stranger's expression shifts, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He realizes that Sam is succeeding, that the ritual is working. Desperate to maintain his hold, the stranger reaches out with a new offer, his voice filled with a sickly sweetness that sends chills down Sam's spine. "Stop this madness, Sam," the stranger whispers. "End this ritual, and I will give you what you desire most. I can return your friend Mark to you, whole and untouched by the darkness. All I ask is that you walk away, leave this place, and let me continue my work." The temptation is almost unbearable. Sam sees a vision of Mark standing before him, alive and smiling, free of the curse. He feels the stranger's offer pulling at him, a promise of happiness that tugs at his heart. But deep down, he knows it is a lie, another trick meant to ensnare him in the stranger's web. With a final surge of will, Sam rejects the offer, his voice filled with defiance. "No, I will not betray them. I will end this, even if it costs me everything." The stranger's face twists in fury, his form shifting into a monstrous shape, a swirling mass of shadow and malice. He lunges at Sam with renewed fury, his voice a scream of rage that fills the chapel with a bone-chilling cold. Bamati, the ultimate sacrifice. Sam knows that the only way to complete the ritual is to offer himself fully, to become the final sacrifice that will break the stranger's hold over Silverwoods. With a heavy heart, he steps forward, placing his hand on the symbol carved by Elias, feeling its power pulse through him. As he speaks the final words of the ritual, he feels his own soul begin to unravel, his essence merging with the light that fills the chapel. The darkness around him trembles, the stranger's form flickering as his power begins to fade, his once unbreakable hold over the town crumbling. The townsfolk watch in silence, their faces filled with both sorrow and gratitude as they realize what Sam is doing. They reach out to him, their hands touching his, their souls joining with his in a final act of unity. The light within the chapel grows blinding, a pure, radiant force that pushes back the shadows, filling every corner with warmth and peace. The stranger's scream echoes through the air, a final desperate cry as his form disintegrates, his power broken, his curse shattered. The dissolution of the curse. As the light fades, Sam feels himself slipping away, his consciousness drifting as he becomes one with the ritual. He sees the townsfolk around him, their faces filled with peace as their souls are finally released from the stranger's curse. They fade one by one, their forms dissolving into the light, free at last. The young girl reaches out to him, her face filled with tears. "Thank you, Sam," she whispers, her voice a soft echo in the fading light. "You saved us all." Sam feels a sense of peace wash over him, a warmth that fills him as he lets go of his own fear, his own pain. He knows that his sacrifice was worth it, that he has given the townsfolk the freedom they so desperately sought. Matamavanta, the aftermath, a town set free. As the final remnants of the stranger's curse dissolve, the town of Silverwoods begins to fade, its buildings crumbling, its streets dissolving into mist. Sam feels himself drifting, his consciousness slipping away, yet he is filled with a profound sense of peace. He sees the faces of the townsfolk one last time, each one filled with gratitude, their souls freed from the darkness that held them captive. He sees Mark, his friend's face filled with a quiet joy as he steps into the light, finally released from the stranger's grasp. The last thing Sam feels is the touch of the young girl's hand, her voice a soft whisper that echoes in his mind. "You will be remembered, Sam. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." For the spirit of Silverwoods. As Sam's consciousness fades, he realizes that he has become part of Silverwoods, a lingering presence within the town's memory. But unlike the stranger, he is not a force of darkness. He is a guardian, a protector, watching over the souls of those who come seeking answers, ensuring that they do not fall into the same trap. In the end, Sam becomes a legend, a spirit that haunts the outskirts of Silverwoods, guiding lost souls away from the shadows, keeping the memory of the stranger's curse alive as a warning to those who would seek immortality at any cost. And in the heart of the ruins, where the twisted oak once stood, a small light flickers, a final reminder of the sacrifice that sets Silverwoods free. End of Chapter 9. In this chapter, Sam completes the ritual, sacrificing himself to free the souls of Silverwoods from the stranger's curse. His ultimate act of defiance breaks the cycle, ending the town's eternal torment and transforming him into a guardian spirit. This chapter brings closure to Sam's journey, setting the stage for the final reflection on the legend he leaves behind. Chapter 10. The Guardian of Silverwoods. Opening. The transformation of Silverwoods. As the dawn breaks over what was once Silverwoods, a strange calm settles over the landscape. The fog that had always clung to the town has finally lifted, revealing a scene of utter stillness. Where twisted buildings and ominous streets once stood, there is now only a desolate field dotted with rubble, the faint remnants of a town that once thrived but was devoured by darkness. Sam's spirit lingers at the edge of this newly empty land, a faint presence, unseen, but felt by the very earth itself. His sacrifice has shattered the stranger's curse, freeing the souls that were bound to the town. The twisted oak tree stands no longer, and in its place is a patch of soil that seems untouched by time, as though something pure has emerged from the very heart of Silverwoods. Bisathi, echoes of the released souls. In the early morning light, a strange shimmer hovers over the land, a faint glow that pulses like the lingering essence of the townsfolk who once called Silverwoods home. These are the final echoes of their souls, freed from the grip of the stranger, rising into the dawn like a sigh of relief. Sam watches as their forms drift upward, fading into the sky, their faces filled with gratitude and peace. Among them, Sam sees familiar faces, the young girl who had guided him, the elderly man who once shared his warnings, and finally, Mark, his friend, who offers him a nod of respect and a quiet smile before dissolving into the light. There is a bittersweet joy in their release, a beauty that mingles with the knowledge of what they had endured. Sam feels a sense of closure, a feeling that the souls he fought for have finally found their rest. Yet, he himself remains, his presence tied to this place by a promise he can never break. Becoming the Guardian. As the souls of Silverwoods drift away, Sam becomes aware of a new role taking shape within him. He is no longer simply a visitor to this haunted town. He has become its guardian, a part of the land itself. Unlike the stranger, who thrived on despair and darkness, Sam's spirit emanates a quiet protection, a presence that wards off the shadows that may try to return. The earth beneath him feels alive, connected to him in a way he never thought possible. He senses the boundaries of Silverwoods as if they are extensions of his own being, able to feel every stone, every whisper in the wind. He knows that while he is bound here, he can use his presence to protect others, to ensure that the darkness that once plagued Silverwoods never takes root again. The passing of time days turn into weeks, then into months, and Sam's spirit settles into his new existence. He is no longer bound by the physical needs of the living, and yet he feels every change in the landscape, the growth of new grass, the passing of animals that cautiously explore the area, sensing both the absence of danger and the quiet watchfulness that remains. Yet, every so often, a chill runs through the air, a subtle reminder that the darkness is never truly gone. Sam can sense the remnants of the stranger's curse, lingering in the cracks and shadows, like a scar left on the earth itself. It is his duty to guard against that darkness, to ensure that it never resurfaces. Over time, rumors begin to spread among neighboring towns, stories of a strange abandoned land where a ghostly presence watches over, a spirit who warns away those who venture too close. Some speak of it as a legend, a story to frighten children. Others, however, speak of it with reverence, calling it a place of protection, a haunted ground that guards against forces unseen. Basa fights, a visitor to the ruins one evening, as the sun sets in a blood-red sky. Sam senses something unusual, a presence drawing near the outskirts of what was once Silverwoods. A young traveller, curious and wide-eyed, approaches the barren field. She has heard stories of the haunted town and has come to see if the tales are true. Sam's spirit stirs, his awareness sharpening as he watches her. He feels a mixture of protectiveness and sorrow, knowing that she, like others before her, is drawn to the allure of the unknown, the magnetic pull of places touched by darkness. The traveller steps forward, and as she does, a chill fills the air. Sam lets his presence drift to the edge of the field, manifesting as a faint whisper, a ghostly wind that brushes past her. She shivers, her curiosity faltering, sensing that there is something watching, something warning her away. She pauses, looking around, and Sam feels a surge of sadness. He wants to protect her, to spare her from the curiosity that led so many to their doom. Summoning all his will, he forms words, his voice a faint whisper on the wind. "Leave. This place is not for the living." The traveller hears him, her eyes widening as she stumbles back. She whispers a quick prayer, turns, and hurries away, her footsteps fading into the distance. Sam watches her go, feeling both satisfaction and sorrow. He knows he has saved her from a fate she could never have understood. But he also knows that others will come, drawn by the stories that linger, the allure of the supernatural, Buloibuff hunts the haunting legacy. As years pass, Sam's presence remains a constant in Silverwoods. He watches as the town fades from memory, its history becoming myth, then legend. Yet every few years, someone comes. Explorers, thrill-seekers, those who are fascinated by the tales of haunted places and cursed lands. Some heed the warnings and leave. Others venture too far, only to feel the chill of Sam's spirit, his quiet urging for them to turn back. The story of Silverwoods grows over time, taking on a life of its own. They say that the land is cursed, that a vengeful spirit haunts the field, a ghost who protects it from anyone who might disturb its restless past. Some claim to hear whispers on the wind, voices warning them away, voices filled with sorrow and regret. Yet, beneath the fear and mystery, a different story also emerges, a tale of sacrifice, of a soul who chose to stay behind, not to haunt, but to protect. Sam's legacy becomes part of the legend, a reminder of the price paid to break the curse and the spirit who remains to ensure that the darkness never returns. Basim Makkamik, a new darkness approaches. One night, as a storm gathers on the horizon, Sam senses something different, a stirring in the shadows, a darkness that feels familiar yet foreign. It is not the stranger, but an echo of his power, a fragment of the curse that has lingered, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Sam feels a surge of dread, understanding that the darkness he fought has not been entirely eradicated. The curse may have been broken, but the stain it left on the land is still there, like an ember waiting to ignite. He realizes that his role as guardian is not only to protect against curious visitors, but to stand against any remnants of the curse that might try to take root. With renewed purpose, Sam strengthens his resolve, preparing to face whatever remnants of the stranger's darkness might emerge. He knows he is bound to this place, a silent protector against forces that seek to corrupt and consume. At the final vigil, as the storm rolls in, Sam stands at the heart of the land, his spirit a calm, steady presence amid the rising shadows. The lightning flashes, illuminating the empty field, and for a brief moment, he sees them, the faces of the townsfolk, lingering in the storm, watching over him with gratitude and respect. They are his allies in this endless vigil, the souls he fought to free now a part of the land's memory, a silent force that joins him in his guardianship. Together, they form a barrier, a wall of light that holds the darkness at bay, a quiet promise that Silverwoods will never again fall to the shadows. As the storm passes, Sam feels a profound peace settle over him. He knows that his journey is not over, that his duty as the guardian of Silverwoods will continue. But he also knows that he is no longer alone, that the spirits he freed are with him, a quiet strength that will endure as long as the land itself. Conclusion. The Eternal Watcher. The years turn to decades, and Silverwoods becomes a distant memory, a place spoken of in whispers and ghost stories. Yet Sam's presence remains, a subtle force that guards against the darkness, a legend that lives on in the hearts of those who sense something watching over them when they pass by. In the end, Sam becomes more than a ghost, more than a guardian. He becomes the spirit of Silverwoods itself, an eternal watcher who stands as a testament to sacrifice, bravery, and the resilience of the human soul. And though the land may be empty, his legacy remains, a silent reminder of the cost of seeking forbidden power and the quiet, enduring strength that guards against the darkness. As the last echoes of the townsfolk fade into the earth, Sam feels a profound sense of belonging, a purpose that transcends life and death. He is Silverwoods, and Silverwoods is him, a guardian who watches, protects, and endures, ensuring that the curse remains broken and that the darkness never returns. End of Chapter 10. In this final chapter, Sam embraces his new role as the eternal guardian of Silverwoods, his spirit lingering to protect the land from any resurgence of darkness. His presence becomes both a warning and a source of peace, a legacy of sacrifice that serves as a reminder of the town's tragic history. This chapter concludes with Sam's acceptance of his fate, his spirit forever bound to Silverwoods as its silent protector.